This is Indian Country Today.
Thank you for joining us. I'm Mark Trahant. Here are the headlines from Indian Country Today. Hours after making history by becoming the first American Indian to be confirmed as a cabinet member, Representative Deb Holland gave an emotional farewell speech on the House floor.
Madam Speaker, I rise today to deliver my final remarks on the floor of the People's House. I'm humbled to have spent the last 2 years in this chamber when I was a little girl. None of this crossed my mind as a possibility for me. I wasn't one of the students picked out to apply to college. In fact, I didn't apply to college until I was 28. I was constantly struggling to make ends meet and raised my child as a single mom. Growing up, Native women rarely held federal leadership positions, and now little girls everywhere will know that they can run for Congress and win.
Her staff, both in Albuquerque and Washington, D.C., saying her achievements were also theirs, and named, among others, some of the bills that became law, such as the Rent the Camo, a pilot program for pregnant service members, and the Progress for Indian Tribes Act. Holland also thanked her colleagues and mentioned her bipartisan work with Republican lawmakers. Finally, she spoke about her love for her home state and issues she was able to address, like climate change, voting rights, and providing much needed relief for COVID. After giving her speech, she turned in her resignation letter to the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi. Holland was sworn in Tuesday as secretary in a private ceremony. A virtual public version will take place Thursday with the vice president. The men known as the Fairbanks Four will be able to sue the city of Fairbanks, Alaska. Marvin Roberts, Eugene Bent, Kevin Pease, and George Free spent 18 years in prison for a murder they did not commit. They were arrested and tried in 1997 and sent to prison. In 2015, new evidence came to light that proved their innocence. As a condition of their release from prison, the four were forced to sign an agreement saying they would not sue. However, they say the agreement is not legally binding because they were coerced. The U.S. Supreme Court rejected the case last week, which leaves in place a decision by the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals that will allow the suit to go forward. The men are seeking compensation and punitive damages from the city, as well as attorney's fees. A tribe in southern Alabama finds itself in the middle of a debate over the removal of coal ash from a plant in southwest Alabama. Alabama Power wants to get permission from the state's environmental department to cap in place coal ash generated by the plant. However, the environmental group, Mobile Baykeeper, wants the residue removed. Yet that group has not spoken to the Moab Band of Choctaw Indians. Chief LeBaron Byrd said they have made it clear to state lawmakers that they are in favor of the coal ash staying on site. Byrd estimates that 2 million truckloads of coal ash would pass through their community over many years if the removal option is executed. Another meeting is set to continue the discussion. To help NASA's mission team identify landmarks on Mars, the Perseverance rover is beaming back images that are being given nicknames in the Navajo language. NASA asked Aaron Yazzie to get permission from the Navajo Nation to use the language Diné Bazad. Yazzie is Navajo and an engineer at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Southern California. According to a tweet from the rover itself, some features have been named and use Navajo words for red rock, diligence, and amongst the sand. A representative for the team says the partnership is encouraging the rover's science team to be more thoughtful about the names being considered for features on the red planet. Facebook phishing scams are targeting Indigenous artists' business page. The fake accounts message those who accept a friend request saying they want a giveaway. It's a way to solicit banking or credit card information. CBC News found dozens of Indigenous artists and businesses across the United States and Canada affected by that scam. Artists say they were initially told by Facebook that the accounts did not violate the social media platform's community standards. But this week, the social media giant says many of the accounts was made aware of CBC News are now being disabled. In a statement, Facebook Canada made an apology to Indigenous artists for not getting this right when it was first reported. And those are the headlines from Indian Country Today. I'm Mark Trahant. When we come back, we'll visit with U.S. Poet Laureate Joy Harjo. Harjo has a new album. I Pray for My Enemies is out on Sunyata Records, Sony Orchard Distribution. She's our nation's 23rd Poet Laureate and the second poet to be appointed to a third term to this important post. A member of the Mvskoke Creek Nation, she joins us today. Welcome, Joy.
Hey, it's good to be here. It's good to see you, actually.
Great to see you. So this is your first recording in a decade. Congratulations, first of all. And second, how do you do this during a pandemic?
That's why I could do it, is because my schedule, I was to be traveling every week. And during the pandemic, I've completed 3 projects: the album, a memoir that will be out in the fall called Poet Warrior, A Call for Love and Justice, and a second Norton anthology in a year of contemporary Native poets called Living Nations, Living Words, which is part of my Poet Laureate project at the Library of Congress.
Excellent. Tell us about the album.
I'm really excited about this album. Of course, I was raring to go after 10 years. I've been writing songs, of course, and performing and all that. But I got together, I have a friend, Barrett Martin, who's a co-producer. And he said, hey, I have a week. We can do foundation tracks if you want to do your album up in Port Townsend. So we took off up there, and then he came down here and we got it done. But it's I'm excited about it. It's got a lot of very Muskogean type songs on there and references and I like to have fun too. I always put in tracks or track or two in which it's I try to have fun with everything I do, even the challenges.
Do you have a favorite piece that we should listen to first?
Oh man. In all of that, there's that rabbit invents the saxophone when I say fun, or there's Ale Nale No, which my cousin taught me, and then I included at the end of it his maybe we should play that one.
Hey, young eagle-lee, we're here to celebrate life. It's so short. We're put here to love and take care of each other. So, ho bunny, let's dance.
He taught me that song. I said, I go out to all these places and I want to sing a song. I want a song that I can sing to people. And he's like the song encyclopedia for at least our ceremonial Browner people, and so he taught me this song, and of course I did my own thing with it, but it's a good one to start this off with because it's to say, here we are and it's a good day and welcome and let's dance.
Let's dance.
Yeah.
I assume as the pandemic starts to be managed anyway, will you be able to get out on the road and do some touring down? Is there any kind of plans at this point?
Well, I've been doing virtual touring, mostly, with performances, but there's, at some point, I don't know if I'm going to do a full-blown music tour with the whole band anymore. That gets really, it's hard to support something like that. But the music's touring around, certainly on the internet, and I always include music in any of my performances. And like next week I'm going in to Kane's Ballroom, which is a historic place. My parents in their dating, used to go to Kane's Ballroom and dance. And so next week we record a podcast there of music. I'm doing it for my mother. That's
wonderful. Let me ask you about your memoir.
Yes, that memoir it's about what I've learned in this life and looking back. I am at an age now, I'm a great grandparent, and I've seen a lot, and I've seen a lot, and so it's really about teachers and being taught mistakes I've made, and just looking back in that way. And it starts out with, I used to love to go visit my cousin. I used to go with my aunt. We would go visit everybody. We'd go visit her cousin, George Kozer. And I love the stories and I love listening. It ends with me with my cousin, George Kozer Jr. We always visit, and the whole book ends with us talking.
Well, that's
So,
nice. I mean, one of the great things about any memoir is the ability to basically transfer ideas to young people. What are some of those ideas that you would like folks to know about?
oh, the story, the prevalence of the stories, that's who we are, basically, our stories. And we are so diverse, even in our own families, you know, and we're so diverse, and the stories, once you start digging around, I'm the person in my family that knows the genealogy, and the genealogy is stories. Once you start digging around, it's quite amazing. It's amazing what we've been through and how we've survived, and then the funny stories are always wound through. And so that's part of it. The other part is that we're spiritual beings. We're essentially, we're spiritual beings, and how do we take care of ourselves in the midst of challenges? And there will always be challenges in this world. That's what we came here for, is to try for a deeper understanding of ourselves and each other.
I was thinking about your post as Poet Laureate and the Library of Congress. And there's this moment where on pop culture, on politics, on many, many levels, Indigenous thought is kind of coming up to the surface in a way that it hasn't been in quite a while. What's been your experience as Poet Laureate?
Yes, the door, when that was announced, I mean, I was in shock too. I was like, it was totally not expected. But what was so amazing is that it did help open a door for awareness of that. Yes, there are Indigenous people in this country, and we're many tribal nations, and some of us are poets. I mean, the anthology in the project will shows a map of this hemisphere with no political markers, and with poets, that we're here. And then we see Deb Holland, of course, who was my poetry student once upon a time at UNM. So we've known each other and been friends for a long time. And that's wonderful to see, because she walks her talk. I have known her since, for years. And she has always, it is always, she's in a post that will, she has a consciousness and a work ethic. And so that's exciting to see. That's a door flung wide open for especially for young people in Indian country, but also for people, the public at large, who so many of them still think of us in stereotypes, or think of us even as dead. Illuminative, the organization, Crystal Echohawk and her organization, Illuminative, has gone a long ways in helping, revise the root stories or the images of natives in this country.
What other perceptions have you had from the Poet Laureate post? We only have about a minute, but I just wanted to get this idea of that perch you have.
Yes. I mean, because what it did and what it does is it puts, I like how it puts poetry in a place, because we all go to poetry because we need words. We have no words. That's how I go to poetry. I write because there's something I want to understand. And so there's that part of it. And then the elevation, it's also the elevation of Indigenous people in this country. That is, and we have, if this country is going to survive, if this earth is going to survive, the Indigenous peoples all over the world have that knowledge that has been so disregarded by a buying and selling culture.
Thank you so much for joining us today, and congratulations on your new album.
Thank you so much. I'm really happy to be here.
When we come back, we will talk to Holly Cook Macarro about Washington. Holly Cook Macarro is a regular voice on Indian Country Today. She's a partner with Spirit Rock Consulting in Washington, D.C. Thank you for joining us again, Holly.
Good afternoon, Mark. Thanks for having me.
Huge week in Washington.
It's that seems like an understatement to say that it's huge, but we have so many things happening. Obviously, our focus has been on Deb's confirmation and the final Senate vote on Monday. We had that terrific celebration where Deb and Secretary Holland, it still feels so great to say that, and Congresswoman Sharice Davids and several members of the Congresswoman's family joined on Monday, and that was really a terrific celebration. She was sworn in yesterday afternoon by her chief of staff, Jennifer Vanderhyde, who many of us know. She was the longtime chief of staff to Mike Honda, formerly worked for a tribe in Northern California as well, has a long history in Indian country, and will be going with her and serving as chief of staff at the Department of Interior as well. So she's been a terrific partner, I think, to all of Indian country that's been supporting this, and a big shout out to Jennifer Vanderhyde as well. So that was the official swearing in. She walked through the doors this morning and began work as the 54th secretary and the first Native American at the Department of Interior. And tomorrow afternoon, she will be doing the ceremonial swearing in, where Vice President Kamala Harris will swear her in. I'm unclear on the time, but Secretary Holland's daughter Soma is going to be streaming it live on Instagram. And I'm hopeful I'll share that information with you. I think some of your staff have that information as well, and have put that out. So I would keep an eye out for that. It's usually very quick, very short, but still I think will be something to see.
How are tribes navigating the new rescue plan?
Yeah, and that process is just beginning, given last week's passage of the bill. And as I mentioned the week before last, we've seen the letter requesting the consultation with the tribes went out yesterday. And so the Department of Treasury is asking tribes to weigh in and provide information on the formula that the department should use. That was a big topic of conversation in Indian country late spring, last summer, and also the allowable expenditures for use. The use of funds was a huge priority for tribes, including lost revenue. As we all know, economic enterprises fund the general fund of tribal governments, given our lack of a tax base. So that piece, I think, is really critical. I'm happy to see that the Department of Treasury is focusing on that. Those consultations are starting on Wednesday, March 31st. They take place over the next week or so by region per usual. And I think there will be very strong participation in those.
And then I wanted to ask, a lot of folks in the Senate that oppose this bill, a lot of tribes have given historically to both sides, thinking kind of building alliances. Do you think that'll change with this?
Yes, absolutely. That has been a topic of conversation amongst, I think, on the tribal leadership side, on the advocate side. There are, everyone was watching what this vote was, where the vote was landing. And so there are some key races coming up. We have Lisa Murkowski coming up in 2022. Yesterday, apparently the state GOP asked her to stop identifying as a Republican. The Native vote, the Native resources are going to be huge. And I think tribal leaders have watched this vote very closely.
Well, we could talk a lot more, Holly. Thank you for joining us.
Yes, thanks for having me, Mark.
And when we come back, we'll have Deb Holland with the final word. We leave you today with a farewell speech by New Mexico Representative Deb Holland.
Madam Speaker, I rise today to deliver my final remarks on the floor of the People's House. I'm humbled to have spent the last 2 years in this chamber, where I proudly served New Mexico alongside my colleagues, past and present in the New Mexico delegation. I'm thankful to Senators Martin Heinrich and Ben Ray Lujan in particular for helping to build support for my confirmation, and to former Senator Tom Udall for his years of friendship and mentorship. I love New Mexico. Not only is it my home, where I raised my child, went to college, started a small business, and started organizing. It's my ancestral homeland. As a 35th generation New Mexican, and not unlike the other families with roots in our state, I have a deep connection to the land, air, and water that sustains our communities. My ancestors settled there because they were drawn to the once mighty Rio Grande and the sacred places that dot the sandstone mesas and granite mountains. That's why I made the most of my time in Congress. I spent every opportunity meeting with families, listening to small business owners, learning about our tech industry, connecting with brave service members and veterans, and working to deliver for the people. When I was a little girl, none of this crossed my mind as a possibility for me. I wasn't one of the students picked out to apply to college. In fact, I didn't apply to college until I was 28. I was constantly struggling to make ends meet and raised my child as a single mom. Growing up, Native women rarely held federal leadership positions, and now little girls everywhere will know that they can run for Congress and win, and that this country holds promise for everyone. In fact, it's the unique experiences and struggles that make good leaders and why I became an organizer in the first place. I believe that it's the fact that I relied on food stamps to feed my family that makes me qualified to advocate for families like mine. It's the fact that I overcame addiction that makes me qualified to help people who are in their own struggles. It's the fact that I know what it's like to be Indigenous that makes me qualified to advocate for our country to meet its trust responsibilities. The beauty of this chamber is that each member of Congress brings their unique experiences to the table and advocates for the causes we know best. With Speaker Nancy Pelosi's brilliant leadership, House Natural Resources Committee Chair Raul Grijalva's wisdom, and House Armed Services Committee Chair Adam Smith's guidance, and all the leadership here in the House, I had the opportunity to make a real difference for communities everywhere by addressing climate change, protecting voting rights, fighting for racial, environmental, and economic justice, and providing urgent COVID relief for millions of people. I'm also thankful for the collaboration and mentorship of my colleagues across the aisle, including Representatives Tom Cole and the Dean of the House, Don Young, and my colleagues on the House Armed Services and Natural Resources Committees. We worked in a bipartisan way to address issues including missing and murdered Indigenous women and ensuring that our servicemen and women and military families had the resources that they need. To my colleagues in the Tri-Caucus, thank you for embracing the issues facing Native Americans and working to address longstanding disparities in our communities. I'm proud that with the support of my colleagues, several of my bills became law. The Not Invisible Act, Rent the Camo, a pilot program for pregnant service members in the 2021 NDAA, the Progress for Indian Tribes Act, provisions from my Military Housing Oversight and Service Member Protection Act in the 2020 NDAA, the Native American Business Incubators Act, and the Veterans Affairs Tribal Advisory Committee Act. I thought I would have more time here, but we are called to service in different ways. Though I'm excited to become the first Native American Cabinet Secretary in history, I'm also sad to leave this chamber. As a twice-elected member of Congress, it has been both a pleasure and privilege to serve alongside you in our quest to improve the lives of the American people. I want each of you to know that I'm grateful for the knowledge you shared with me, the friendship, and the work we accomplished together, and I will miss all of you dearly. I wouldn't be here today without my extraordinary staff in Albuquerque and here at the Capitol, the Natural Resources Committee staff, and the House Armed Services Committee staff. They all put in very long hours on behalf of our state and our country. My legislative accomplishments are also their accomplishments. Additionally, thanks to all of the staff who work right here on the floor, whose dedication and experience Keep our Congress running. I'm so grateful to all of you. And to New Mexico, thank you. Thank you to the activists, the supporters, the families and communities that make our state an incredible place to call home. Madam Chair, I yield back the balance of my time.
At times, she was emotional as she thanked her staff and noted the work they did in her time in Congress. Today is Holland's first day as Secretary of the Interior Department. She's the first American Indian to hold a cabinet position. And that's a slice of our Indigenous world. We'll be back with another edition tomorrow. I'm Mark Trahan.
Sometimes you got to take a stand just because you know you can. Oh, you got to run, you got to run.
Indian Country Today is produced at the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism and Mass Communications at Arizona State University.
This is Indian Country Today.